Recording has started.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name's Leah Smith. It's great to have you here with us. I'm the marketing manager here at ListEngage, and I will be your moderator on today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items before we kick things off. We're going to go into introductions here in a moment, but for visibility to everyone, we are on a recorded line, and this recording will be sent out to everyone after the webinar, so you're able to review on demand at your leisure. Next up, one housekeeping reminder: if you have a question that comes to top of mind while we're going through this content, please put it in the chat throughout the duration of this webinar. You can also hold your questions until the end, but it's highly encouraged to go ahead and put those in the chat as soon as they come to top of mind, so we can start filtering those into the Q&A session. And now we're going to move on to introductions. So I've got two phenomenal resources on the line with us today who are going to lead us in this discussion on Marketing Cloud Personalization. First, I have Cole Fisher. Cole Fisher is the Strategic Solutions Lead here at ListEngage, marketing champion, and has 10 plus years of ecosystem experience. Cole is a phenomenal resource who's able to really bridge the gap between the psychology of something, the product that we're using, and those end customer experiences. So we're really fortunate to have Cole here with us today. We also have Richard Hamill, another amazing resource. Richard leads up our Marketing Cloud Personalization practice here at ListEngage and has seen the gauntlet of customers from vertical to industry. Richard has really seen it all. So between these two, we're going to have a phenomenal session today on leveraging the full value of Marketing Cloud Personalization. With that, I'm going to close out my moderation portion for this time and pass it over to Cole to get into the content. Cole?
Thanks, Leah. I don't know about you, Richard. I think Leah needs to do all of our intros from now on. Just said that's much better than what I would ever talk about myself. But so, Richard, you and I were talking the other day about Marketing Cloud Personalization. Kind of came to this sort of central thesis that in a really exciting way, this is one of the most broadly capable products in today's Salesforce marketers tool belt. But at the same time, it's also one of the most underutilized products. And so a lot of marketers, Salesforce customers, MarTech shoppers in general, kind of come to the table looking for a specific need to fulfill. So for instance, a recommendation engine or abandonment triggers or something like that, that is a current gap in their marketing strategy today. And it may do very well at executing exactly that. But we may want to come in, we may come in with these preconceived notions of what we need it for, what it will do best for us, and we can anchor our expectations on it just being, or not straying far from being, a tool that fulfills solely that use case or a limited bucket of related use cases. So maybe you can kind of help us dive into some of the broader high-level categories within personalization. But I hear from marketers in the space that they're not really executing a lot of the multi-dimensional capabilities. And so one of the common things I always get to hear is I know it can do more. I'm just not feeling like I don't know that I'm getting the most out of it. And that's true with any MarTech, but especially I think with personalization because it's so broadly capable.
Yeah, that's correct. So a lot of times when people think of personalization, they're looking at it just for product recommendations, right? And it as you mentioned, it's just a slice of the overall implementation solution. And we see here on this slide here the various channels you have here. And it's really important that you personalize your experience across all these different channels, whether it's a website, mobile, ad tech, call center, in-store at a branch, whatever the case may be. Because we live in a world now where you have companies like Amazon and Netflix, and they set the expectations for customers to like a hyper-personalized interaction experience. And so this applies to others as well too. And what this does is when you have that hyper-personalized experience across various channels, it's directly tied to customer loyalty. Because if a business can't figure out who their customers are and what their preferences are, that customer will go somewhere else, right? And you see this a lot with churn with these various industries like Netflix and Hulu and that sort of stuff. And so integrating your brand across the various channels is extremely important, as a customer's personalization journey should continue when they switch between channels, such as going from a web browser to email or a mobile device.
Yeah, I think like web recommendations, for instance, like great use case, and it certainly executes on that as well, if not any, better than any technology out there. But if you're just using it as web recommendations and it's solely a recommendation engine, then we're not only missing the boat on a lot of other areas we could be using this in, but it also becomes a very expensive recommendation engine. I mean, like Salesforce tools, to be honest, like they're not the cheapest on the marketplace because they're so broadly capable. So they're really built to do a lot more than that. And when we kind of underutilize them, it becomes a very expensive, one-trick pony for us.
Yeah, exactly. And if we look at the use cases, and give it a slice of the various use cases, and we have a graph here, a chart that shows the business value with level of effort for various use cases. And the thing to keep in mind here when thinking about use cases and implementing is consumers don't think in channels or use cases. This is a marketing term. Marketers think in that way. And so the way a customer would see this is every touch point or use case or channel they interact with should be the easiest and most helpful experience, and it should be consistent across the entire channel. And so that consistency is critical for promoting the brand. And as you see here, these are just some examples of key use cases, not all the use cases for personalization, but they're relatively important ones. And as you see, most of them have a high business value and some have a higher level of effort than other use cases per se.
Yeah, and these are real high level, but like to your point, I think there's, these are the categories of use cases. And this is a great way to kind of visually look at this, say like, here's what's really valuable for us, here's what's actually really difficult to implement, or here's what would be real low-hanging fruit for us. But within each of these, there are several permutations of that use case in different ideas, and so what pages or how that use case is being represented, and so this looks like a kind of nominally low quantity of potential use cases, but really inside these there's a lot more to explore with each of these.
Exactly. We're going to tackle a couple in detail, but before we do there, I just want to discuss some considerations about personalization in general and what you should be looking for when implementing use cases, and why. And so the first one we talked about is aligning your use cases with business goals and priorities. And there's some questions you want to ask instead of say, we need to implement all use cases, right? You got to find out what the key goals of your business are, right? You also need to find out what areas of focus for, in this case, maybe the marketing team or maybe the e-commerce team. What is your focus for this year, right? And then how can personalization achieve those goals? So, and this is a great place where, well, or Colin, your group, the Solcons, really assist clients with this. The second one is a bit more tricky. It's called data unification. So, or data excellence. And when you have various channels, every channel you add, it increases the number of interaction events and also customer identity data. And so if you don't have a unified profile across these channels, it can definitely lead to reduced conversion rates. Now, normally this could be solved in various technologies like reverse ETLs, data warehouses, CRMs, CDPs, and of course Salesforce Data Cloud, which you could talk to any of the Solcons, including Cole, about Customer 360 and Data Cloud solutions. There's my little plug for the day. But customer data unification is critical, and having a unified profile is absolutely critical. And so, and not just on customer unification, but making sure you have the proper pricing data, inventory data, product data, that sort of item, depending on how your catalog is set up. And the third one, which is equally as important, is test and refine. When you're implementing various use cases and you have an implementation plan, you have to address all stages of the customer's life cycle, including medium term and long term. And just remember, solution deployment is an ongoing commitment. It doesn't end when the project ends, because you should be continuously reviewing in-flight campaigns to make sure they're performing as you expect. And you reduce costs of these campaigns by understanding what's working and what's not. And the only way to really do that properly is with automated A/B testing. Just test and refine, test and refine.
Yeah, and I love this approach. I think Marketing Cloud Personalization, for me, I kind of refer to it as data, or like marketing in general, where it's never really done. If you're getting the most out of it, it's an iterative process. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly, improving and optimizing the performance. And so I like the way this approach is lined up here. I think especially with the first step, we have the ability to think not in terms of the product itself. Let's kind of leave, I say when we approach how we're designing use cases or what we're using this for, let's leave the confines of a specific need or our understanding of the product capabilities, and let's just identify the main pain points. So to your point, like, what does that look like, if it's commerce over the next year or 3 years, or what are the gaps in our current state? What ideas could we be implementing to help improve the customer experience? And what are we being measured on? So is that channel revenue? Is it CSAT scoring? Is it enriching customer data? Or is it, service case deflection? There's a number of things that personalization could be used to back into. So we want to identify the core capabilities, the core needs, and back that into the capabilities of personalization. And so we start by defining the problem and then design, how we want to solve those with personalization. And I think the last point here, not only is testing one of the most exciting and potentially valuable use cases in personalization, but I think as an overall practice, I would liken it very much to Marketing Cloud Personalization, in that it too is underutilized as a strategy overall. And I say the keyword being strategy. So a lot of us are leveraging testing as tactics in email subject lines or in web content and things like that. But I'm talking about an overarching strategy where we have this element stitched into our guiding strategic roadmap, what we're testing, how it's being tested, how we're democratizing that data and the learnings from testing internally and applying them across the board. So we'll dig in more into specific use cases here, but we'll touch later on some more on the subject of testing a little bit.
Absolutely. And speaking about delving into specific use cases, we're going to delve into a couple right now, and we're going to start off first with social proofing. Well, Cole, take it away for social proofing.
So I will try to refrain from going, geeking out too far and going down the rabbit hole of psychology and behavioral economics too much. But the reason I like to highlight this piece of kind of like the reasoning behind it is it's great when we understand, when we get to see what works in personalization or in our marketing efforts in general, for that matter. But it's just as valuable to hypothesize and drive towards an understanding of why it's working. So when we pair the why with the what, it allows us to learn more efficiently, more effectively, and extrapolate those learnings into an applicable framework across other channels and concepts that we can expect to see similar benefits from. So for social proof, for instance, this idea started basically in the 70s with a sociologist named Mark Granovetter, and he coined the term the strength of loose ties. And he noticed physicians and their diagnoses and their prescriptions and the advice they were giving were more likely to be influenced by their peers, people they saw as similar to themselves, and they shared assumed similarities. In the 80s, a book on persuasion was written by a psychologist named Robert Cialdini, and he authored this book where he coined the term informational social influence, aka social proof. And it's expresses this notion that we all tend to look towards other people's behaviors and decisions in order to validate our own actions. It's sort of this monkey see, monkey do effect. And in essence, we're all bound by a limited cognitive bandwidth. We all have finite time and resources and attention that we can offer something. So presumably, if we can rely on the signals provided by others who, presumably have as much knowledge and have spent as much, if not more time on any given subject or product or service, if we use those as indicators of what we should be interested in, it saves our own time and energy and involvement. So one of the cases that this author references is this Chinese restaurant. And they took the Chinese menu and they randomly assigned asterisks to certain dishes. And a control group was shown the standard menu, and an experiment group was shown this menu with asterisks all over, just random, arbitrarily chosen dishes, saying these are popular items. This is what a lot of people are choosing. And what they noticed is that those dishes in the experiment group were ordered 13% to 20% higher than they were on the control group. So we find the funny thing is we find that suggested popular items are not only typically increased in conversion rates for those products that are marked as being popular, even if it's arbitrarily chosen in this case, but they also garner higher customer satisfaction ratings and reduce conversion time, and so like less decision time. And so what's happening is there's less trade-off of investment of time and decision and overall effort, and so basically the satisfaction for these products or services becomes higher because of that. So for marketers looking to reduce time and friction in the conversion process, this is a great use case to lean on. So this goes beyond pushing popular products. Like, again, what are the pain points? So are we trying to grow loyalty memberships? Maybe it's popovers or banners or whatever it is saying X number of customers who join our rewards club receive an average of 20% savings or something like that. Or just seeing like these are popular items, but like you have here on the on the screens, this is a huge impact for us.
Yeah, that's a great context frame and why social proof matters, and probably also an excellent example of why you're a marketing champion and I just write code. So.
It says the brains behind the operation.
Yeah. So, the key thing is like you said, social proofing. It encourages others to do something with a product, right? Buy a product, click on it, whether you have a review, a testimonial, social shares, right? It's an encouragement to actually purchase that product or go to a page or product or service and interact with it. So it encourages interactions, basically. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about journey orchestration, and this is primarily with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So journey orchestration, you can tailor individual journeys for every customer based on their previous behavior and preferences, right? So you can anticipate individual needs through real-time insight data via Marketing Cloud Personalization, and configure and use these various events to trigger an individual journey and also exit a user out of a journey depending on the events. A classic example would be perhaps an abandoned cart journey. So abandoned cart in itself isn't a complex journey. User adds it onto a cart. They do nothing. It starts off a journey. In 3 days, they maybe send an email. But what can be the case is you can have that journey customized depending on the user's maybe perhaps loyalty profile data. You can also have the user exit the journey if they purchase an item in the cart. That's via real-time data sent over to a Marketing Cloud, or perhaps other user metadata like perhaps a geographical region, lifetime value, that sort of thing. So journey orchestration, like I said, it reinforces of having these different channels personalized for the exact customer as opposed to just an abandoned cart campaign for all your customers. So you can get as granular as you want to get, but it's important to think about that personalized experience, and even in a channel or something like an ESP like Marketing Cloud, you can get further granularity based on the events or metadata coming in through personalization.
Yeah, we've mentioned iterative testing and this evolving approach as we go, and this fits in perfectly with how we think about orchestration and how our journeys develop over time. Because a lot of times we view a journey as this stagnant asset that we've created, and we just kind of like set it on cruise control. But when we think about who's coming into the journeys, how the audiences change over time, what we've been learning over time, what other multivariate tests have shown us, there's a lot we should be testing and pushing the limits on. So even abandoned cart or abandoned browse, whether limited time counter clock offers, might be something that really help kind of spurn action on the end user. But as well, I think I've seen a lot of Salesforce customers do this, where they'll have limited time offers for abandoned browse or abandoned cart triggers, things like that. I would also caution, just beware of the conditioning effect, where we may be seeing tons of direct revenue attributed to cart triggers, but is this really a positive thing for us, or is this really kind of the signal that's related to us leaving lots of opportunity cost because we're now getting discounted revenue, what would have been regular revenue had we not conditioned them for some of these considerations. So I think the best marketers that we see in this area of journey orchestration are those that are incessantly testing and pushing the limits of their journeys and where and how they take advantage of personalization features within those journeys.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. And so we talked about two channels so far. We discussed an example with a web channel. We discussed an example with email channel. And finally, we're going to talk about a mobile channel with mobile app integration as a so mobile messaging is, in my opinion, essential to any omnichannel personalization experience. And having a targeted one-to-one personalization on mobile is going to put your campaign strategy to like the next level or boost it, because you can implement these high value events, whether it's like a flash sale or a abandoned cart, and that require relatively quick responses, because the customers, the world we live in, we're all attached to our mobile devices. I think most of us, if not all of us, are, right? And we generally check notifications that are important to us or tailored to our needs. But you have to be really cautious with this approach, because you have to target things that are immediate value to the user with their phone, and you want that immediate value or value in general, because you want the customers to opt into their notifications. Because if it doesn't appeal to the individual customer, they're probably going to delete the app or turn off notifications, in which case nothing's going to come through. So mobile messaging is extremely important, because everyone has their phones with them, but you have to be considerate of the quality of messages that are coming through the end user's device.
Yeah, I think when I think of like mobile apps, like speaking of underutilization, like not hitting across enough channels is another area where we see personalization just being put into a limited capacity when we know there's more value, to be derived from it. So
Right.
Web is easily the most common channel that we see personalization implemented on, but why not unleash that advantage to app users, real-time email opens, customer service, sales, and so on? We know that a customer who is engaged across multiple channels is more likely to convert and have higher lifetime value. Similarly, I kind of view it as personalization is that much more valuable when we're allowing it to reach across multiple channels as well. Our own lifetime value for personalization becomes higher as a result. So to frame it in the context of the common use of web recs, we've seen plenty of times where personalization is powering the recommendations on the website, but we have a separate engine that's native to the app that's powering recommendations in there, and then we may have an email recommendation engine separately as well. And so no centralized understanding of what the customer is seeing, of what they're engaging with, how their behaviors or affinities are changing or being gathered on other properties or channels. And so the output for your web recs, for your mobile app, for your email recs, all become less effective as a result of that. So that's a big miss when we don't have this centralized across channels.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important part, and thank you for bringing that up. The Einstein machine learning algorithms within personalization are important. Because why is it any better than, say, like the Einstein machine learning in Commerce Cloud, let's say? The key thing is, like you said, there is the omnichannel experience, because you have data coming in from these various channels, where something like the machine learning in Commerce Cloud only has the web channel. And so it's really important, if you have all these channels putting data in and you're sending recommendations out to the various channels, you're going to get correct recommendations that are tailored to that one-to-one personalized experience. And that goes back to the original topic we talked about, of having unified data. You want to continue the customer's journey when they switch channels. They start off on an email, they go to a web page, then maybe a day down the road they're on their mobile device. The flow should not be interrupted just because they switch devices or channels, and now they're seeing different recommendations. and they have to hunt back to the page they were looking at before. It should just be completely unified no matter what channel they're on. And the key to that is having a machine learning algorithm work across that omni-channel. And that's one of the areas where Marketing Cloud Personalization really excels in.
I think on that note, I think Leah, I think there's a poll that we have. Just out of curiosity, I'd love to see the people that we have here, who's using personalization across multiple channels. What channels are those? I'd just be curious to kind of see what some of our local users here are doing.
Yeah, and let's wrap it up with the poll and questions and answers.
Yeah, I'll before we get to the Q&A, I'll kind of wrap up with my last little tidbit of behavioral science geek out. But social psychologists coined this effect, the cocktail party effect. And just envision yourself in a room with a lot of other people, dozens of conversations kind of droning on at the same volume, this sort of 60 decibel white noise of conversation. And what they find is there's this kind of odd phenomenon that occurs in our own brains, that we separate all these different discussions rather than that using that limited cognitive bandwidth to assess what all the conversations are and being completely scattered. We separate each of these kind of conversations into auditory streams, and we can essentially block out the ones that we don't want to pay attention to and focus on whatever's most pertinent to us. And so in a world where the average user is, average customer is hearing between 4,000 and 10,000 promotional messages in a single day, this effect allows us to decipher what's important, what's meant to specifically benefit us, and what's just noise that can be tuned out. So if you hear your name or pertinent information being mentioned, to tune into that, and that's where you can best invest your, cognitive bandwidth, your attention, your focus, your energy, and resources. So that's just kind of the key of why personalization, why these use cases, why testing these things out, and really expanding on this can be so valuable to us. So Leah, do we have? Sorry, we have questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, team. We do have a few questions. So first question for us today is, are inventory badges related to social proof? I'll open that up to either of you.
Yeah, so I'll jump on that if you don't mind. It's a separate but related concept. So this is under that that little scatter plot we looked at of different use cases, and we said there's different permutations of different use cases within each of these, and so it'll be called social proof or badging by under the Salesforce concept umbrella, but really it's a related concept. Psychologists would call it scarcity, but scarcity applies to time as well as resources. It's basically FOMO. It's fear of missing out. We have this natural loss aversion where we don't want to lose something that includes opportunity, and so we want what we can't have, or at least what is limited in quantity or availability. So there's a lot of studies around e-commerce or even on-site supermarkets that found of all the promotions they ran, more than double any other promotions, the biggest impactors for them were limited quantity of X numbers of products per customer. That oftentimes that strategy is garnering between 2 and 4 times average order value. And so this parlays into personalization use cases in terms of limited inventory badges. So if you consider truly capping limited supplies, or popular items per transaction, or discounts available only to loyalty members or online shoppers or something like that, or even if you're not retail, it could be fins where it's limited time or limited number of applicants are allowed to qualify for certain accounts or credit card or something like that. So these ideas lead to the ability to create segments, for people that are hitting a product display page or a certain service, and maybe we can kind of trigger off of that. So I can go further into the amount of there's studies with really popular findings around how this is valuable, but I've been in a conversation recently where they're testing not only do we show sold out, or do we, items, or do we suppress those types of items? But even a step further, they're actually exploring, do we mark them as out of stock or sold out? And what they're starting to find is, out of stock correlates with, poor logistics, or this company can't manage their inventory. So it becomes kind of a frustration point for customers. Whereas sold out indicates it's the popularity of items. So it gets back into that social proof element of everybody really wants this. And then, this also opens up the door for back in stock triggers or segmentation based on dwindling inventory. And of course, testing what and how we're displaying with sold out items or expiring offers or limited time availability, things like that.
Phenomenal. That was a very well-rounded answer. Thank you, Cole. And I'm going to read off a couple more questions, but one housekeeping note here. If you're on the call and maybe you don't want to put a question in the chat, but you do have a question, please feel free to scan that QR code and submit a form. We're happy to follow up and answer any questions anyone might have. But in the interim, the next question we have is, how could we apply this to a FINS user of Marketing Cloud Personalization? Is this vertical specific? So again, opening this up to either of you.
I guess I could take that one. It's definitely not vertical specific. We do have various FINS clients at ListEngage, and generally, I'll talk about a banking industry per se, but there's a couple things you want to account for use cases. One is bounce rate. So when users are drawn to your website or whatever channel they have via promotion, maybe a Facebook ad or a Google ad, you want them to continue further down the path, whether that is looking into your various loan options if you're a bank, or perhaps service offerings if you're an insurance company, that sort of type of stuff. So, and you can do various use case campaigns to reduce your bounce rate there. And the second one is, a lot of times the audience for the FINS market are anonymous customers as opposed to known, because once you log into these websites, you're taken into a banking portal where no personalization is done per se. And so you're targeting mostly anonymous users. So in that case, you want to have their anonymous browsing history from before. And so for a bank, customers who are doing commercial banking versus personal banking have vastly different experiences. So if you have someone looking at commercial banking, you might want to do banners on the homepage that talk about commercial credit cards, commercial loans, that sort of stuff, versus the personal options in that case. So you can, it definitely applies to different industries. You just have slightly different use cases that are like, you're not going to do product recommendations for banking unless you offer a lot of different options. They want to recommend like a CD or loans and that sort of stuff, credit cards. So, but most of the time it's just it's reducing bounce rate and promoting services on various pages, either a home page or a category page. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Richard. We've got one more question in the chat. So if anyone else has any questions burning a hole in your pocket, please put them in the chat now. For now, this will be our last question unless more come through. So what would the overlap, or rather what overlap do you see from Marketing Cloud Personalization and Data Cloud? Opening this up to either of you again.
I'll jump on that. So I do see a lot of conflation between the use cases for Data Cloud and personalization. And if you think about it like a Venn diagram, there is some feature overlap, and early versions of Interaction Studio, Evergage, touted this sort of CDP light feature that they called it, and it's still the case. It does, but it does this across its own channels. So wherever personalization is tagged, whether that's the JavaScript on the site or SDK on your mobile app. But what I really kind of boil this down to is personalization is really doing user identity recognition, whereas Data Cloud, among other features, like is really doing identity resolution. And so personalization itself is not meant to serve as like the central repository for all things customer data, nor does it propagate segments to non-personalization channels. It's going to be working on whatever channels it's directly implemented to and has integrations into. And so, however, the segments it does operate with are benefited greatly by adding Data Cloud to the mix. So Salesforce Data Cloud does ingest data from all over the MarTech stack and build more robust identity resolution with more advanced customizable logic to enrich personalization data and segments. So adding Data Cloud is basically like a steroid injection into personalization's unified customer profile. So that's enriched with even greater behavioral and affinity data and things like that for more advanced and powerful segmentation, if that makes sense.
Phenomenal. Are there any other questions? I'll give you a couple more seconds here to put them in the chat. If not, we have a few minutes left in the day here to give back to everyone. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We appreciate your time. This recording will be shared afterwards. I'll open it up to Cole and Richard. We do have one more question that just popped in. So can you talk about what to watch for or worry about during implementation cycles, given your experience?
So Richard probably has a
Yeah.
ton of experience on these at the front line. Even I'll turn it over to the brains of the operator and the looks and the hair. Okay, last time to know I'm here. What do you think, Richard?
Well, sure. Thanks, sort of segue. Really threw me off my game there. But okay, so yeah, this is a great question because it's not just, this question doesn't really tie just for personalization. It's for any large scale implementation in itself. So the first thing is you have to set customer expectations of what personalization is and what personalization isn't, right? We have a lot of customers who think personalization is just an analytics tool, right? So setting expectations and also understanding of what personalization is by doing the customer training, whether that's through ListEngage solution consultants, whether it's through eCampus or trailheads within Salesforce. There's various different channels one can use for learning about personalization and training. The second one is like we talked about in this presentation, it's going to be clear alignment of what your use cases are without implementing feature creep, right? A lot of times people will just say, well, I only want one web campaign, and we do preach the crawl, walk, run approach. Let's just start you off with the basic foundation and grow from there, right? And sometimes that works like 90% of the time, but sometimes you have clients that don't know what they want to do, and when they get into the details of it, they find other things are out there, right? And so we try to want to avoid feature creep by working with the client, say, what are your goals now? Where do you want to be 5 years from now or a year from now? That sort of stuff. The other big one is not having buy-in from various teams. We have a lot of large enterprise clients, and they have various departments. So like getting access to perhaps product data, we have to talk to the CDP team, right? The CDP team may have their own schedule and when they're going to give us the data, right? Things like that. So there's dependencies on what we need. Perhaps deploying the beacon, personalization beacon on a website requires the web teams buy-in. Things like that. There's external dependencies that may not be known when they start the project. Or think, oh, we have Salesforce, we'll put it in there. But well, no, we have dependencies on data, we have dependencies on websites, our web servers. We have dependencies perhaps if you're using a third-party ESP, or maybe even if you're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud or CRM, there's other dependencies that you have to involve other departments on. And they may not be aware that we've had cases where they weren't even aware what personalization is or the project in itself. And so, and then also keep in mind there is inherent red tape and business complexities sometimes with clients. It's just moving processes forward through meetings, and that could delay a project. So if they have a timeline of, say, we have to get this done in 2 months, that could be extended out due to just the inherent latency of how long it takes to do decisions within that organization in itself. So I think the key thing is find out all your dependencies, get a realistic expectation of what the product can and cannot do, right? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to implement now? Where do you want to? What's your business needs and goals now? What's your business needs and goals a year from now? And also things like, is anything changing in the next year? Like perhaps the website itself is completely being redesigned 3 months after this. If that's the case, then You may want to wait to implement it because you're going to have to redo all this again, perhaps, things like that. So it's just finding out all these different variables that can affect the success of a project, not just the short-term success, but the long-term success of personalization. So.
Yeah, Rich, that's the nail on the head. I think I would add to that. I love the approach that you laid out to begin as well. It's like, how are we tying this to overarching goals? How are we, establishing those teams? Who needs to be involved in the process? But one of the things that I've noticed just on the front end of a lot of these projects is a lot of the times, if we do understand the whole breadth and capability of on all the things that personalization can be doing, customers can kind of go through this like analysis paralysis of like, wow, there's so many options. I want to do all of this, kid in a candy store kind of style. And how do we, kind of boil that down to what are just the single most, what are the best value drivers here? What's our quickest path to value? And so that kind of scatter plot that you showed about level of effort and value over time. So like, how do we get there? Let's just select a couple of these to start with. Who needs to be involved? Let's get a clear roadmap and define what success is going to look like, and then start to iterate, because it's personalization. Like I said, it's iterative. It's never going to be done. We're always going to be doing something new and more and better and optimizing each of these use cases even after we build them.
Right.
We do have one more question. I think this will be our last question of today's webinar, but are you excited about how personalization will work with Data Cloud?
No, not really. Next question. No, I'll take that one. Yeah, so there's a couple of great things here. So, and Nicole, I'll do a little bit and you can add on if you want. So, first of all, the engagement data and the event data personalization collects can be fed right now, today, into Data Cloud. And that will give you, and there's actually only certain data for personalization that can be fed into Data Cloud in itself. So this is where we're at today. So when you're doing segmentation or activation on segments within Data Cloud, you're going to get this additional data that can't be obtained from anywhere else into Data Cloud to make those additional decisions per se. That's one exciting feature right now. So we have a lot of clients say, hey, how do I get this engagement data, whether it's an engagement score or various event data or things like that, into some sort of common data model that I can do something with, and Data Cloud is your answer there. But the more exciting piece for me, per se, as an architect, is the future, when the back end of personalization is going to be hosted on the CIM or Data Cloud in itself. And then that opens up the door immensely, because then you don't have to worry about writing connector or having connectors export data on a batch, nightly or hourly basis, whatever. That all data that personalization is written is going to be stored onto Data Cloud natively. And so you can do real-time queries, real-time activations, all that stuff natively, because personalization collects this data real time, and Data Cloud will have access to it real time. So once it's all on the same backend or the data layer itself, then it really opens the door for a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think for me, the way I kind of look at it as a high level is personalization really kind of solves for a lot of the big pain points that marketers have been facing for a really long time around profile recognition and real-time interaction and how we manage those across multiple channels. I think that's been super exciting in and of itself. And I think Data Cloud is solving for this really holistic picture of data accuracy, cleanliness, holistically integrated strategy across all channels, so that we're not so that our ability to respond omni-channel is more related to how a customer views omni-channel. And so it's really exciting. I think too, I mean, every 2 weeks, Data Cloud is coming out with, sprints of new releases and really exciting features, and 1,500 developers working around on Data Cloud. I think the future, Richard, to your point, the future of what's going to be happening with this is really exciting, but I'm already entirely geeked out on what both of these products can individually do specifically. So I think it's really exciting.
No better way to end today's webinar, I think. That was such a phenomenal note to end on. So thank you everyone for attending. We will share this recording afterwards. Richard, Cole, there are a few comments for both of y'all in the chat if you want to take a peek at those. We're going to close out today's session. If you do have questions, please feel free to email us at info@listengage.com, scan that QR code, or follow up with us on any other channel. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.